Story number 1, cabin rental. I pulled into the gravel drive just before 6 in the evening, my hands stiff from gripping the wheel for the last 4 hours. The cabin sat exactly where the listing photos showed it, tucked into a stand of birch trees about 50 yards from the lake. Early spring melt had left the ground soft and dark, patches of old snow still clinging to the shaded areas beneath the porch. I was here for 2 weeks of uninterrupted work, landscape photography for a client's nature campaign, and the isolation felt like a gift after months of cramped city assignments. The lockbox code worked on the first try. Inside, the cabin smelled like pine cleaner and something earthier underneath, probably just the lake and wet soil. I dropped my bags and did a quick walk through. Small kitchen, living area with a wood stove, 1 bedroom, bathroom, clean enough. The windows faced the water, which was still partially iced over, gray and flat in the fading light. I was unpacking my camera gear when my phone buzzed. The host? A woman named Carol, who I'd only communicated with through the rental app. Her message was apologetic and a little scattered. The previous guest had apparently left some personal items in the basement storage area and hadn't responded to her attempts to contact them. She asked if I could check whether the items were still there, so she'd know whether to mail them or wait for the guest to arrange pickup. She included the code for the padlock on the basement door. I texted back that I'd take a look in the morning. It seemed reasonable enough. People forget things. Hosts deal with this kind of thing all the time. I made myself dinner, unpacked the rest of my clothes, and tried to ignore the quiet. I'm used to city noise, the constant hum of traffic and voices. Here, there was only the occasional creak of the cabin settling and the faint drip of snow melt from the roof. Around 10, I remembered the basement. I figured I might as well check now and get it over with. The door was at the back of the kitchen, painted the same cream color as the walls. I pulled up Carol's message for the code, but when I reached for the padlock, I realized it was already hanging open on the hasp. The door itself was ajar, maybe an inch, showing only darkness beyond. I stood there for a moment, telling myself Carol must have forgotten she'd already checked, or maybe she'd sent someone else. But the message had been specific. She'd given me the code as if the lock would still be engaged. I pulled the door wider. Wooden stairs descended into blackness. I found a light switch, and a bare bulb clicked on below, illuminating rough concrete walls and stacked plastic bins. I went down slowly. The air was damp and cool, smelling of earth and something slightly sour, like old wet cardboard. The bins were labeled in faded marker. Holiday decorations, linens, fishing gear. Nothing that looked like it belonged to a guest. No suitcase, no forgotten jacket. I checked behind the stairs and in the corners. Nothing. Back upstairs. I locked the basement door from the kitchen side and tested it twice. I texted Carol that I hadn't found any guest items, and she replied almost immediately with a confused emoji and a thanks anyway. I tried to settle in for the night, but the cabin felt different now, more aware of me. I kept thinking about that open padlock. I told myself I was just tired. The drive had been long. I wasn't used to this much silence. The smell started around midnight. I was in bed, nearly asleep, when I noticed it. Musty and organic, like thawed earth and rotting leaves. It seemed to be rising through the floorboards, stronger near the bed than by the door. I got up and checked the window, thinking maybe it was blowing in from outside, but the glass was sealed tight. The smell intensified as I stood there. I could almost taste it, thick and damp in the back of my throat. I tried to ignore it. Old cabins smell strange. The ground was thawing. There were probably gaps in the foundation, vents I hadn't noticed. I pulled the blanket over my nose and lay very still, listening to my own breathing. That's when I heard the shifting sound below me. Not loud. Just a faint creak of weight redistributing, like someone adjusting their position on a mattress. I held my breath. The sound came again, directly beneath the bed. Then silence. I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to rationalize. Old houses make noise. Wood expands and contracts. Animals get into crawl spaces. But I couldn't make myself believe it. The sound had been too deliberate, too human in its rhythm. At 3:07 in the morning, I heard footsteps. They were muffled but distinct, moving slowly from one side of the bedroom to the other, tracing a path directly below me. I could track the progression. Near the window, past the foot of the bed, toward the door. Then they stopped. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The silence stretched out, and I started to think maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I'd been dreaming. Then I heard them on the stairs. Not the basement stairs. The interior stairs, the ones that led from the living area up to the bedroom level. Slow, careful steps. Someone trying to be quiet. I slid out of bed and grabbed my phone. No signal. I'd known there wouldn't be. The listing had been clear about that. The nearest cell service was 20 minutes down the road. I moved to the door as quietly as I could and checked the lock. Just a simple push button on the handle, not a deadbolt. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. I could see the gap under the door, a thin line of darkness. A shadow interrupted it. Someone standing just outside. The door handle moved. Just slightly, a slow turn, testing. It stopped when it met resistance from the lock. I watched it return to neutral. Then it turned again, more deliberately this time, and I heard a faint click as whoever was out there tried to work it open. I didn't think. I grabbed the dresser and dragged it toward the door, as quietly as I could manage, my hands shaking so badly I nearly lost my grip. The handle stopped moving. I shoved the dresser flush against the door and wedged the desk chair under the handle. Then I backed away and stood in the center of the room, holding my phone like it might suddenly work, like someone might answer if I screamed. I heard breathing on the other side of the door, slow and even, waiting. I don't know how long we stayed like that. It felt like hours. Eventually, the shadow under the door disappeared. I heard the stairs creak again, descending this time. I didn't move. I stood there until the window started to gray with dawn, and then I grabbed my keys and my jacket and climbed out onto the porch roof. The drop to the ground was maybe 8 feet. I landed hard in the soft mud and ran for my car, not looking back at the cabin, not letting myself think about what might be watching from the windows. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove until my phone showed 1 bar of service, pulled over on the shoulder, and called 911. My voice didn't sound like mine when I tried to explain. The dispatcher kept asking me to slow down, to repeat myself. I pulled up the rental listing while I waited for the police, scrolling back through the calendar. The 2 weeks before my arrival were blocked out in gray. No reservation, no previous guest. When the police finally searched the cabin, they found the crawl space entrance hidden behind a panel in the basement. Inside were blankets, empty food containers, a battery-powered lantern, and a phone, not password protected, with 43 photos in the gallery. All of them were of me, sleeping in the bed, unpacking my cameras, standing at the kitchen sink, taken from below through gaps in the floorboards, in the dark. They never found him. The officer told me the tracks leading into the woods were already melting into the soft ground, impossible to follow. "They're still looking," he said, but I could tell he didn't expect to find anything. I think about those photos sometimes. How many nights he'd been there before I arrived, waiting in the dark beneath the floor. How he knew exactly when to move, when to stay still, how close he'd been the whole time. The cabin's been taken off the rental market. Carol sent me a refund and a message I never opened. I don't do remote locations anymore. I stay in cities now, where there are people and noise and neighbors who'd hear if something was wrong. But sometimes, late at night in my apartment, I still wake up to that smell. Thawed earth and rot, rising through the floor. And I lie very still, listening for footsteps I know aren't there. Story number 2, Feth. I started running the Greenway system 3 years ago, when the job started getting to me. Teaching high school history sounds manageable, until you're doing it every day with 30 kids per class and parents emailing at 10 at night. The trails helped. 5 miles before work, nothing but trees and the occasional other runner nodding as they passed. The rain had been warm that week, the kind that leaves everything damp and soft. Fog settled into the low areas around the trail entrances, thick enough that I couldn't see more than 20 yards ahead some mornings. I didn't mind. Fewer people out, more quiet. I noticed the car on a Tuesday. Dark blue sedan, maybe a Camry, parked alone at the north trailhead when I pulled in at 6:15. Nothing unusual about that. People parked there all the time. I did my stretches against my car, locked up, and headed out. Thursday, it was at the middle lot. I'd driven there instead, because I wanted to run the loop in the opposite direction, change things up. Same car, I was pretty sure. Same model at least, same color. It was parked near the trail map sign. I figured it belonged to another regular, someone with a schedule like mine. We probably just kept missing each other in the fog. Friday, it was at the south entrance. I'd parked there because it had the best access to the longer route, the one that added an extra 2 miles. The sedan was in the far corner of the lot, backed into the space. I remember noticing that detail. Most people pull in forward. I did my warm-up and started running. The fog was heavier that morning. It pooled in the low sections of the trail, and I had to slow down in a few spots where I couldn't see the path clearly. I didn't pass anyone. Didn't hear anyone behind me. Just my breathing and my shoes on the wet pavement. When I got back to my car 40 minutes later, the sedan was gone. I thought about it on the drive home. 3 different trailheads, 3 different days, same car. But the Greenway system covered a lot of ground, and plenty of runners mixed up their routes to keep things interesting. I did it myself. It made sense that someone else would too. I told myself I was being paranoid. Occupational hazard. You spend enough time around teenagers, and you start seeing patterns that aren't there. Monday morning I went back to the north trailhead. Earliest start of the week. Trying to beat the stiffness from the weekend. The sedan wasn't there when I arrived. Good. I'd been imagining things. But when I came back from my run, it was parked 2 spaces down from mine. I stopped walking and just looked at it for a moment. The windows were tinted dark enough that I couldn't see inside. The engine was off. No one sitting in the driver's seat that I could tell. I stood there longer than I should have, waiting to see if someone would get out, start stretching, head for the trail. No one did. I got in my car and left. That smell hit me on Tuesday. I'd parked at the middle lot again, and when I stepped out of my car the air was thick with it. Wet asphalt, that rain, on hot pavement smell, but mixed with something else. exhaust. Like a car had been idling there recently, engine running, even though the lot was empty except for my vehicle. The fog made it worse, trapped the smell low to the ground. The sedan wasn't there. I checked. I walked around the entire lot before I started my run, and it was just me. I ran faster that morning. Didn't stop to check my pace or catch my breath at the turnaround point. I wanted to get back to my car. The whole time, I kept thinking I'd hear footsteps behind me, but I never did. Just my own breathing getting harder and the sound of my shoes. The car was there when I got back. Same spot where I'd smelled the exhaust. I sat in my car with the doors locked and watched it for 5 minutes. No movement. No one approached it. The windows were too dark to see anything. I started my engine and backed out slowly, watching the sedan in my rearview mirror until I turned onto the main road. I should have called someone then. I know that now. But what would I have said? There's a car that parks near me sometimes. I see the same vehicle at different trail entrances. It sounded stupid even in my head. Wednesday I drove to the south entrance. The sedan was already there when I arrived, parked in the same corner spot, backed in. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, waiting. No one got out. No one came back to it. The fog was thin that morning, and I could see the whole lot clearly. Just the two of us. I didn't run. I drove home and called in sick. Thursday I went back. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that I was overreacting. Maybe I just needed my routine back. I drove to the north entrance, the one closest to my house, the one I used most often. The lot was empty. I did my full 5 miles. No sedan. No exhaust smell. No one else on the trail. When I got back, I sat in my car and felt stupid for being scared. I took my cool-down walk through my neighborhood like always. 4 blocks from the trailhead to my house. Slow walking to bring my heart rate down. The streets were quiet. A few people getting newspapers. Someone loading a briefcase into their car. Normal. The sedan turned onto my street when I was 2 blocks from home. It stayed back, maybe 50 yards, cruising at walking speed. I could hear the engine, that low idle. I kept walking, told myself it was a coincidence, someone who lived on my street. But when I turned left at the next block, it turned too. I stopped. Turned around. The car stopped. I started walking again, faster. The car rolled forward. Matching my pace, that's when I ran. Not jogging, sprinting. The kind of speed that makes your chest burn and your vision narrow. I cut across the Hendersons' lawn and up their driveway, pounding on their front door hard enough that my hand hurt. Mrs. Henderson opened it in her bathrobe, eyes wide. I was already pulling out my phone, telling her to stay inside, calling 911. The sedan circled the block twice, while I was on the phone with the dispatcher. I watched it from the Hendersons' front window. Slow, steady loops. The third time around it didn't come back. The police found it parked 3 streets over, empty. The driver had walked away, they said. Left everything inside, including the folder. The officer showed it to me later, after they'd photographed everything. He didn't let me touch it, but he held it open so I could see. Printed photos of my house. Different angles, different times of day. You could tell by the light. My car in the driveway. My car not in the driveway. The side windows. The back fence. And a piece of notebook paper, handwritten. My work schedule, arrival times, departure times. 5 days worth of data, accurate to within 5 minutes. They arrested him that afternoon. Found him at a coffee shop 4 miles away. Pending investigation, they said. Not enough to hold him long-term yet. They were working on it. I drive to a different trail system now. 20 minutes farther, different county. I check my mirrors the whole way there and the whole way back. I vary my schedule, leave at different times, take different routes home. But sometimes, when the fog is heavy and I'm the only car in the lot, I smell it. Wet asphalt and exhaust. And I sit there with my doors locked, waiting to see if I'm alone. Story number 3, server room. I stayed late on Thursday because the building is quieter after everyone leaves. No one stops by my desk to chat about their weekend plans or complain about the coffee machine. Just me and the servers, which is how I prefer it. The firmware update would take about 2 hours, and I had already told the evening security guard I would be in the basement when he did his sweep at 9. The server room sits at the end of a long hallway in the basement level. Fluorescent lights overhead, concrete walls painted that industrial beige color that is supposed to be calming but just feels institutional. The servers themselves generate a constant low hum, and the cooling fans create white noise that drowns out almost everything else. I like it down here. It feels separate from the rest of the building. At 9:17, I glanced at the badge reader log on my secondary monitor, just routine monitoring while the firmware installed. Someone had accessed the basement level at 9:14. 3 minutes after the security guard finished his sweep. I figured it was the cleaning crew. They usually came through around 9:30, but schedules shift. Maybe they were running early tonight. I went back to watching the progress bar creep across my screen. The footsteps in the hallway were faint enough that I almost missed them. I only noticed because I had paused the podcast. I was half listening to, reaching for my water bottle. The steps were slow, deliberate. They stopped. I waited, bottle halfway to my mouth, listening. Nothing. Just the server fans. I told myself I had imagined it. The building makes noises at night. Pipes expanding and contracting, the HVAC system cycling. I have worked late dozens of times and heard all kinds of sounds that turned out to be nothing. But I got up anyway and opened the server room door to check the hallway. Empty. Fluorescent lights stretching away in both directions. The stairwell door at one end, the elevator at the other. No one. I was about to go back inside when I noticed the boot prints on the tile floor. Wet. Leading from the stairwell toward the server room, then stopping about 10 feet from my door. The prints were large. Definitely not from Rosa or Kim, the 2 women who usually cleaned this floor. These looked like men's boots, size 11 or 12 maybe. I stepped out further and looked both ways again. Still no one. The prints just stopped. Whoever made them had been standing there, facing my door, and then what? Turned around. The return prints were not as clear, but I could see faint wet marks leading back toward the stairwell. Probably maintenance, I thought. Maybe they were checking the utility room down the hall and did not want to disturb me. That made sense. That was reasonable. I went back into the server room and locked the door behind me. Not because I was scared, just because it seemed like the smart thing to do. The firmware update was at 62%. I sat down and tried to focus on my work, but I kept glancing at the door. The small window in the upper half showed only the empty hallway. I turned my podcast back on, but I could not concentrate on it. I kept the volume low. At 9:31, the elevator chimed. I heard it clearly even over the server noise. That distinctive bell tone that signals arrival. I watched the floor indicator above the elevator doors through my window. The light moved from 3 to 2 to 1 to B, basement. The doors opened. I could see them from my angle, reflected in the glass of the fire extinguisher case across the hall. They stayed open for maybe 8 seconds. long enough for someone to step out. But no one did. Then they closed again. I stared at the hallway. My heart was beating faster now, and I noticed my hands had gone cold. The elevator does not just come to a floor by itself. Someone had to press the button. Either inside the elevator or in the hallway. I had not pressed it. And I had not seen anyone in the hallway. Maybe someone had pressed it upstairs by mistake, I thought. Pressed B instead of 3. Realized their error and pressed the correct floor before the doors opened. That happens all the time. Except the doors had opened and stayed open. I pulled out my phone to check the time. 9:32. The cleaning crew should definitely be here by now if they were coming. I thought about calling the security desk. But what would I say? Someone used the elevator. I heard footsteps. I would sound paranoid. Then I heard the door handle move. Not a knock. Not a rattle. A slow, testing turn, like someone was checking to see if it was locked. The handle rotated down, met resistance from the lock, and stopped. Then it returned to its original position. I stood up from my chair staring at the door. My mouth had gone dry. The badge reader outside beeped. Once, twice, 3 times. Someone was swiping a badge, trying to get in. But the reader did not give the approval tone. Just the error beep. Again and again. I moved to the desk phone and picked it up, keeping my eyes on the door. My hands were shaking slightly as I dialed the security desk extension. Security, this is Joel. Hi, this is Sarah in IT. I am in the basement server room. I kept my voice low, barely above a whisper. Someone is trying to get into the room. They keep swiping a badge, but it is not working. You expecting anyone? No. I thought it might be cleaning, but they would not need to badge in. The door is usually unlocked when they come through. Okay, stay on the line. I am sending someone down right now. I heard him radio to another guard. I kept watching the door. The badge reader had stopped beeping. I could not hear anything in the hallway now. Just the servers. Just the fans. Sarah. Still there. Yes. Mike is in the elevator now. 30 seconds. I waited. The longest 30 seconds. Then I heard the elevator chime again, heard the doors open, heard footsteps coming down the hall, fast this time, purposeful. Security. Mike's voice, loud and clear. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Mike was standing there with his flashlight, even though the hallway lights were on. He looked past me into the server room, then back down the hallway. You see anyone? He asked. No. But someone was trying to get in. I heard them. He walked down to the stairwell, checked it, came back. No one here now. You sure you heard the badge reader? Yes. Multiple times. Joel arrived a minute later, slightly out of breath from taking the stairs. They checked the entire basement level while I waited in the server room doorway. Storage closets, utility room, bathrooms. Empty. Let me pull up the camera footage, Joel said. We went to the security office on the first floor. He scrubbed back through the basement hallway camera to 9:30. And there he was, Marcus Chen, fired 2 months ago for attempting to copy proprietary client data onto an external drive. I had been the one who caught him, flagged the unusual file transfer in the logs. He had not made a scene when they escorted him out. Just packed his desk quietly and left. On the footage, Marcus walked out of the stairwell at 9:29, carrying an empty black duffel bag. He walked directly to the server room door and stood there. Just stood, facing the door. For 11 minutes, he did not try the handle, did not swipe a badge. Just stood perfectly still, facing the small window, his expression blank. At 9:40, he turned and walked calmly back to the stairwell. Joel radioed the police while Mike walked me to my car. They found Marcus's car parked 2 blocks away, but he was gone. The cloned badge they found in his apartment worked on every door in the building except the server room. I had changed those permissions myself after he was fired. I do not work late anymore. The firmware updates can wait until morning.